Affirmative.
Take
On
two.
my way. Yeah.
Take 2 and 2, 1. This is as close as we can get to the base of the World Trade Center. You can see the firemen assembled here, the police officers, FBI agents, and you can see the two towers. A huge explosion now, raining debris on all of us. We better get out of the way.
A little bit of chicken fried, cold beer on a Friday night, a pair of jeans that fit just right.
If you want a vision of the future, imagine a childless 34-year-old woman lecturing you about how to hold more inclusive meetings on a Zoom call forever. Here we are, another night on MGTOW Chats. Expat, how are you? You there?
Yeah, doing very well, thanks. Good to
All
be here.
right, thank you for joining. You have been riding shotgun when I'm is not available. Want to thank you, the listeners. It's been a lot of fun the past few months doing these shows covering various topics, and so we continue with tonight's guest. We have the honor of Zman joining the show. I do not think too many of our listeners know who Zman is. Zman is a sole proprietor of the Z Blog and the Z Blog Power Hour. You can check out his work at zman.com, just the letter Z. Zman also has a
Zman.com.
the
Right.
Zman.com, thank you.
Yep.
Also, he has a sizable following on Gab where he posts some funny stories and photos of the clown world we reside in. All links are in the description. Guys, please look at the description and stop leaving comments about who's the guest and where can I get that article. It's always in the show's description, like most of the time. Anyway, Z-Man, I want to start off by stating, unlike some of your peers, you've been pumping out fresh content every day, including podcast audio recordings, which is a blessing to say the least. I'm sure you are aware many content creators on this side of the Great Divide tend to burn out or fade away. You, on the other hand, keep it going and keep it fresh, easily digestible and never bland. When a normie is asking me in passing about my political views, I tend to shy away. It's really no one's business, but sometimes I get pressed or put in an awkward position. And without hesitation, I always tell them, okay, well, here's a blog I can text you that I enjoy, and I think this encompasses my view on politics. The reason I point people to your body of work and your theory of everything is it's easy for someone who is awash by mainstream media that know on some level that, you know, they're being lied to, confused on by what's happening around them, or cannot grasp the general direction in which the world is going. And for this, I thank you. Welcome, my man.
Yeah, well, it's great to have you on the show, Z-Man. And I just wanted to also point out that, you know, I've been a reader for many years. You know, back when I was living in Asia, I would read your daily essay, you know, as a lunch. So that was kind of like a daily ritual for me. So, you know, probably going back to, you know, 2016, the rise of Trump and all of that. So it's been really a journey to read your writings. And actually, I wanted to, you know, maybe start by asking a technical question that I'm kind of interested in, and maybe some readers will be too, is just, you know, how do you manage to be so productive? How do you crank out an original essay every day and a podcast every week? Do you have some sort of like routine or some sort of, you know, magic that allows you to be so prolific?
Yeah, I don't know. You know, I never really thought about it too much until, I mean, when I used to actually write a lot more, but I actually cut back quite a bit. I used to probably would post like 3 times a day. But what happened, it's a weird thing, you know, you start doing something and you always end up someplace different. It's just the nature of it. I mean, I do technical work for a living and it's always been that way. And I'm sure, you know, people in engineering would have the same story that, you know, it's just a journey. Every project you do. And for me, when I started, it was totally by accident. I used to haunt the comment sections of conservative websites like National Review, or I think the Federalist. Red State was one. I used to like tormenting them. And one of the moderators at National Review, he contacted me. He said, you know, I just had to tell you that people were more interested in your comments than our content, which I thought was hilarious.
Ouch. Yeah.
And he also said, you know, that the writers are terrified to see you show up in the comment section. And he said, you know, you should just, you know, you're helping these guys. You should just do your own thing. And so I thought, well, what the heck? I'll give it a shot. And I've owned a domain since the 90s. So So, well, I'll give it a shot. I have the domain, I have a server, just whatever. And so I started doing like normal copy paste blogging. That's what other people were doing. That was 2013, 2014, something like that. And so, I do the 2 or 3 things a day, like Steve Saylor does, and I don't know, just kind of boring. So I started writing these short little essays, the 1,000-word essays. And all of a sudden I started getting people interested. They're like, wow, that was great. That was a very simple and digestible explanation of something. And, so I just started doing that more and more, and that became the thing. And honestly, it takes about, I don't know, realistically, most mornings I get up in the morning and I have no idea what I'm going to write. It's just whatever pops into my head. I have my coffee, feed the cat. I sit down for half an hour. I write 1,000 words. I go do my normal thing, sit down, run it through the editor, clean it up a little bit. And that's it. And that's about it. About all it takes. And but after you do it a while, it actually gets a lot easier. You should, the challenge at writing is always, make sure that you have a subject that, if you're going to write 1,000-word essay, it has to be a subject that you can make interesting for 1,000 words. And I'm a minimalist writer, so that makes it a lot easier. And I don't like complicated answers. I'd be a very good Amish person, so. I like plain, straightforward stuff. I don't like, I'm not trying to show off to anybody. And I like it when people can read something of mine and say, it's not 100% right, but it's 90% right. And it's, it took me 2 minutes to read, something that it was really, other people would make, a wildly complicated, affair out of, I give them a 2-minute essay that they can moves them down the field, and that's a good thing. I like being accessible, and so it just kind of evolved. And the same thing with the podcast, really. It used to take me a lot longer to do, but people talked me into just kind of winging it, which I do more of now. But but that takes longer. Podcasts are a longer thing to do because you have to record it. You have to think about what you're doing before you start talking. And that's a little bit more time consuming, and it's kind of weird.
It's hard. It's not easy.
Yeah, when you sit, of course, when you do a solo act too, it's a little weird, and so you have to be aware of that. You can, what you sound like. So, that's a little bit harder, but yeah, I get a kick out of it. But the thing I like about the podcast, and this has happened a lot, and it happens more of late, but. Is that people will hear my voice and say, they'll, if it's in a public area, they'll say, excuse me, but you sound familiar. And because, I guess I never knew this. I have an odd sounding voice, I guess, but they call it NPR voice. But yeah, that takes a little bit more time. But the writing is actually, once I get on a roll, it's pretty easy. And, I do 2 things behind the green door for my pay-per-view stuff. So I do usually 2 posts a week, but that's the easy stuff, like pop culture type things. I watched the season 4 of Stranger Things, which was hilariously bad. And so I wrote about that. But and I do a podcast every Sunday behind the green door, and I do so yeah. I joke around. I'm the hardest working guy in this business, and it's probably true. I don't think anybody produces as much content as I do.
No, I don't. I would attest. I would definitely agree with you on that level. Is that how you got started? Was the comment section, and you decided to just make a show out of it, or was there some type of red pilling moment where you started seeing things for what they are and not what you're being told? Like, tell us a little bit how you got the ball rolling.
Well, it's funny. I've always been a race realist. I grew up poor. And when you grow up poor, you're very realistic about the human condition, because that most people are poor because they're not very smart. They lack self-control. They have poor impulse control. They're their own worst enemy. And even the people who are poor and suffer from this know this. they get it. It's just a reality of it. And when at that level, when you're in the underclass, someone who is an 85 IQ is versus 100 IQ is really easy to spot. It's a big difference. When you're in the middling, middle class people, everyone's clocking in within 10 points of each other, 95 to 105. So you don't really see the differences in people as much. Almost, you can sense that people are, or you feel like everyone has the same potential, because they largely do. But in the lower classes, that's not the case at all. It's kind of like when you get into STEM fields, you quickly run into people who are really smart. And you realize there's a big difference between the really smart guys and the guys who are, making a living. And but that at the at the extremes, at the lower end, you notice these things. And I, so I grew up fully aware of the fact that there's differences between boys and girls and the races and rich people and poor people and all this sort of thing. And so that was never the case. Actually, I kind of went through a sort of a blue pilling thing when I got into my adult years. In order to get along with middle class people, I took the blue pill and tried to ape the sort of bourgeois sensibilities, and I was never very good at it. I'm in a way, I just lack the social skills to better pull it off. So at some point, probably about 10 years ago, I just said, yeah, I'm just not going to. I'm not going to try anymore. I'm just going to say what the hell I want to say. And that's kind of been that was the revelatory moment for me. Being blunt and just saying whatever's on your mind will piss people off, but a lot of people, many more people, will simply appreciate the candor, especially in the age of lies we live in, where it's just so absurd that some of the things that we're asked to accept. A man in a woman's swimsuit is not a woman. Everyone knows this. It's a mentally disturbed man. This is crazy, and the people who are cheering this on are nuts. We're just, it's the old Orwell line. What is it? Speaking truth in the age of lies is a revolutionary act, or something like that. So that's kind of what's happened with me, and especially like on the podcast. It's funny. I sound so reasonable when I'm saying outrageous things. I think,
yeah, you have a deadpan way of delivering these truths, which is great. I think it's very compelling. And what you said about people respecting the fact that you speak frankly, I don't agree with everything you write, but I appreciate your candor, and you're not. It's very unpretentious. You speak very plainly. So, to the extent that people disagree with you, they can also pick apart what you're saying. It's very honest, very transparent.
Yeah, that's the thing. I've always liked that about people. I used to like Christopher Hitchens. I didn't agree with him all the time, but he was very good at making his arguments, and he was honest about his arguments. And so, okay, I don't agree with you, but he was a real craftsman, particularly with the spoken word. He could really take a man apart. And and that's it's a fun thing to watch. Yeah, it's a fun thing to watch. So, but yeah, I think the other thing is too I decided when I started writing and so I put the site up. I said, you know what, people can go in my comment section and say whatever the heck they want. I'm not going to get mad at people for disagreeing with me, and that's turned out it's turned out to be pretty well. I don't do a lot of moderation at all. Most people behave themselves, and I get people who will show up and they'll start going into unapproved subjects, and it kind of regulates itself. And I think that it's one of those times when you treat people like adults, they tend to act like adults.
Yeah.
And when they disagree, though, I will respond, because I think that's that seems like the right thing to do. I can't respond to every comment. I get 100 emails a week. And I get how many comments? The podcast Friday's post had 250 comments. So there is a limit as to what I can respond to. But I think that's the thing. It has to be different about our politics, is that I think our side, if we're ever going to go anywhere, we have to sort of develop our own aesthetic. And there's a lot of people, I'm not alone in this, there's a lot of people in our thing who are just speak honestly. Jared Taylor is a guy who just simply says what his opinions are, and he says it in a very gentlemanly way. He's a man who commands your respect because he's a dignified man. You might not agree with him. There are things I don't agree with him on, for sure, but you respect that. Hey, these are his opinions. He's going to say them in good faith, and he's going to hear your criticism in good faith. Well, what else can you ask for?
One of the problems that I have with the sort of grift right, if you will, that we alluded to earlier, the people like, I don't want to name names, but there's a lot of people out there that are basically just attention seekers on social media, is that, when you dig into what they actually believe, you find, well, they haven't really written books. They haven't written essays. There's no there.
There's no body of work.
There's no body of work that you can critique and subject to scrutiny. And so, and that's how they get away with, not really having fixed opinions, not having to stand by what they believe. They're shapeshifters.
Yeah, I think, the written word kind of forces you to declare your interest. I think you can get away with a lot more in a spoken word. And of course, video, is so in the moment. I think it's just it's a very different audience for sure. One of the things I was really surprised about when, I was doing the writing thing, I started getting, once I kind of figured out what the hell I was doing and I started getting an audience, there was this guy in Canada, some Canadian guy who was a radio guy. He wanted to interview me. It was the first time I ever did an interview, and gosh, I wish I could remember his damn name. But it's his fault that I actually do a podcast now, because he explained all the mechanics of it, how to use Audacity, how to clean up the recording, what kind of mic to buy and all this stuff. It was very, very helpful. And of course, he had to do all that stuff because the only way he could interview me is to teach me how to do this stuff. So, we actually did a 2-track recording where I recorded my voice, he recorded his voice, and then he did the overlay and edited it up. And well, anyway, that's how I got started. All of a sudden, people said, "Wow, I never would have imagined you sound like this. You have a different narrative voice than what I've expected." And it was a funny part about that was that the readers didn't listen. It was an entirely different audience. It was very little overlap. I mean, I've been at events. I was like the Zoomers. I was at a Zoomer event 2 years ago, I guess. Nick Fuente's first event. I went to his first event, and there was these young guys there I was talking with. They're half my age, and they knew my voice. They had heard my show, but they had no idea I write. They had no idea that I had a website and write. So it really is kind of a funny thing that there's that different audience there. And I think video, it definitely has a much bigger, different audience. I think the people who are into live streaming are just there for that momentary emotional rush of the combatants going at it, and laughing and so forth. It's just a different crowd.
Definitely.
You're discussing a little bit about kind of like you talk about the GOP gatekeepers. My first question to you, I guess, is political reform possible? Like, you're talking, you're writing about the Buckley conservatism. Now, I only watched a few videos of that guy Buckley in the 70s, and he seemed all right. He's kind of mainstream talking points. Personally, I don't think there's much of a way out of this, especially at the voting booth. And a lot of people are like, yeah, we're taking this back. And what was it? Steve Bannon was out there saying it's going to be like a huge red wave. What's your take on that? Is there a way voting our way out of this mess we're in?
Well, it's funny. I mean, first to say is that Bill Buckley in the 1980s was a rock star. And for example, I lived in Boston in the 80s, and he came to speak at Boston University. And there were cops all over Commonwealth Avenue. There's protesters all over the place, for and against. This was a huge thing. It was like a major band, the Rolling Stones or something, had come in. It's hard to believe looking back at it, but that was the case. And the reason for that, of course, is that he and conservatism were the first for a long period, the 60s and 70s, really probably the 50s, 60s and 70s, a whole generation passed without having anyone in public say things that most people agreed with. And so it was a really energizing moment. But the lesson, though, of that period is that like a lot of the old paleocons back then said, that if you're going to, as a conservative, engage in a fundamentally left-wing system and abide by the left-wing rules, it's unlikely that you can achieve right-wing ends. And the further, you're almost always going to end up corrupting yourself as a way of staying within the rules of the system. And that's what happened with Buckley and the conservatives. I mean, the Bill Buckley of the 1990s was a shadow of the Bill Buckley of the 1980s, who in fact was a shadow of the guy in 1960s. You can look up his debate with James Baldwin. It's still on YouTube. And it's shocking that it's on YouTube. I mean, because some of the language, of course, is was acceptable in the 1960s and very not acceptable today. But his general opinion was that segregation, this is Bill Buckley in the 1960s, that segregation was the only way for the races to get along. You know, I mean, I frankly, no one said that in the 1980s. I was around then, and it's obviously no one says it today. But I think the problem with reform, I mean, here's the reality of power. The people in charge wield the power they need to wield in order to remain in charge. That's just basic human organization, and they're always going to be on the lookout for any threats. You know, in the age of personal rule, that guy who looked like he was a little bit scheming, the king has been thrown out of the castle window, and that way the problem's solved. And you know, you're always on the lookout for those kind of guys. In a modern system like ours, it's simple. You control the institutions. You have selection pressure to prevent any kind of troublemakers from percolating up to the top. And you have relief valves. You know, that's a lot of what conservatism has been, as a relief valve. And there's, you know, you have other ways for the public to vent their outrage. But the lesson of Trump is that in order to reform things, you would need something close to a revolution, because you have this massive amount of people who are operating all the institutions, who all agree about roughly the same things. You know, the example I like to use is that in the 1920s, right, about 100 years ago. So was it I think 1921? I don't remember. But a covered wagon full of dynamite blew up on Wall Street, killed 30 brokers, injured a whole bunch of other people, blew a big hole in the side of a bank, and it was done by anarchists. Now, at that time, everyone understood that anarchists came from Italy and communists came from the Pale of Settlement. And there was a lot of Bolshevik problems. There was a lot of anarchist problems. The anarchists did a letter bombing campaign. They sent letter bombs to all these rich people. And fortunately, someone got tipped off and probably saved hundreds of lives. They blew up the Los Angeles Times building. And so when the Wall Street happened, though, all the rich people said, okay, this is now touching us. We're going to do something about it. And they rounded up all the anarchists and threw them out of the country. And they didn't care about their immigration status. You were gone. They also swept up a lot of Bolsheviks and said, well, you know, I hope you didn't forget your Polish or your Hungarian or your Russian, because you're going back home. And then they shut down immigration for 50 years. And that was the end of that, because they said it wasn't working. And that's a tell there, because what it says is that when rich people feel something, they act on it. But when they don't feel it, they'd have no interest in acting on it. You know, the average rich person in America cares more about trans rights. It has a more emotional appeal to them, even though they make sure their children don't fall into that stuff, and that they're protected from those predators. But that it's a spiritual thing. It's a way for them to signal to each other, you know, their commonly held beliefs. So that means something to them. They care about that. They don't care about the fact that every night there's people you know, tossing and turning at night, Americans, because of migrants pouring over the border, right, or the rampant crime problems. That doesn't affect them. They don't see it. You know, we'll get some crime reform here in the next 10 years, because guess what? Criminals are starting to attack rich people. As soon as that happens, all of a sudden the rich people get religion on crime. So, you know, if you want to get reform, if we're going to reform, it can't be through the election system, because it doesn't affect rich people. It's going to have to be through something that really touches them. And, you know, that's the reality of it. And I think, you know, I mean, I think it will touch them. I think we're rocketing towards a very difficult period. And a lot of rich people are going to look around and say, you know what, this isn't working. We got to do something else. And, you know, it could be a civil war. It could be, you know, I think the period we're going to probably run into is something closer to what happened to Russia after the fall of the Soviet Union. Highly unstable, you know, oligarchs going crazy. I mean, we're already kind of in that. So, but you know, I mean, who knows? It could get worse. I mean, you know, look, this was always a revolutionary country. I mean, people forget this. I mean, this is a very long, peaceful time. I mean, America was a fairly violent place with violent uprisings into the 20th century. So.
Right. Well, it seems that a lot of the politicians seem to be like game managers for the derp state. I kind of want to point out Andrew Cuomo's resignation over flirting, but he didn't resign for killing a bunch of grandmas in nursing homes, which, you know, that's what most of the people in New York State were freaking out about. I mean, I remember seeing overpasses on the Southern State Parkway, Northern State Parkway, that Cuomo killed my grandfather or my uncle, so on and so forth. You know, this is during the peak of the lockdowns. Why do we allow why do we allow them to resign with no recourse? And I also want to point out that the people who replace them are unelected. They're unelected officials, yet we bow to them, listen to them, wear 3 mouth diapers, so on and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that human beings don't like competition. We say that, oh, we're all capitalists. We like, competition. It's good for the marketplace and all this stuff. That's not true. That's a complete lie. Every businessman hates competition. He's constantly looking for a way to avoid competition. The marketplace naturally, for anything, naturally evolves into an oligopoly where the main players no longer have to compete and can control the market, unless there's some outside force of government or some exogenous power or something like that. But generally speaking, that's how it goes. And these guys have, they've arranged the system here where it's heads they win, tails we lose. If you're Congressman, Smith in New York, and you get on the wrong side of the voters, it's not a big deal. You get voted out and you land in some sort of consultancy in Washington, or maybe you do a turn. If you're young enough, you can do a turn at a Wall Street firm. And, you make a lot of money, and and then they put you somewhere else. I mean, as long as you're as long as you're a good earner, you do what you're supposed to do, you get taken care of. I mean, so it's easy to ask people, a congressman, to sacrifice his constituents when he gets rewarded handsomely for it. So and of course there's all this selection pressure for that. If you're the Republican Party, you're constantly on the lookout for troublemakers. That's the number one thing they do, is make sure those guys don't get into the system. They've been trying desperately, for example, to get rid of that goofy woman, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who I admit I find her extremely entertaining, but she's the argument against democracy, just like AOC is the argument against democracy. But yeah, I mean, here's even a better example. I mean, the people who managed the mortgage meltdown, they took Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, they took these institutions which were designed so they couldn't possibly lose money, and managed to bankrupt them. And no one was punished. They all walked away with tens of millions of dollars. I think Franklin Raines had to write a check for $1 million, but he got paid like 50 million. I mean, that's, who wouldn't take that deal? All the people who are running foreign policy right now were running foreign policy during the Bush years.
Yeah.
I mean, right. None of them have paid the price, and they're all pathological liars. So it's not as if they're just mistaken. These people are kind of demented, really. So there's no, that's why reform is impossible, because reform means punishment of some sort. Somebody has to be punished. And there's no appetite for it until it starts to harm rich people. I think once the rich people, and we may be a lot closer than that, we realize, though, because there are no great fortunes to be made now in tech. That's all done and over with. There's no more killer apps. That's all done. There's actually a consolidation already starting to show up, and numbers still matter. A guy like the Amazon guy or the Musk guy, these guys who stand out as super rich, they're going to be faced with the prospect of either become great philanthropists or have their money taken from them. So I think we're probably headed to some leveling period with a little crisis. And, I think we'll hit a period where rich people have to get very, very serious about their role as elites in society. Now, they may not be up to it. They may, we may have reached that point where they just don't have the intellectual horsepower to pull it off, and things will get real ugly. But, then maybe we get a new elite.
Yeah, it makes me think of this guy. I remember Eric Cantor, he got voted out. I forgot what his position was. He was like a House Majority Leader. I stand corrected. And he got voted out. Everyone celebrated, and then he wound up getting like a $1 million salary working for some law firm, if I stand corrected. And that always bothered me so much, because at that time I could care less about politics. But then I saw something like that happen where, he's just going to get a $1 million salary, being a consultant for a law firm. And that really irked me as a young man.
Well, the best thing about Cantor was that his job prior to getting into Congress was as the accounts receivable manager in the family furniture store. So, which is, there's nothing dishonorable about that. Yeah. That's fine. But how do you go from that to being a brokerage firm? There's the skill sets don't apply. Obviously he was hired because he has a Rolodex, as they used to say. He knows a lot of people, and he opens doors. But a big part of what they do that for, though, is that Wall Street or the big tech giants or whoever these different outfits, the reason they hire a lot of ex-congressmen is because it tells the current congressman that, hey, if you stay in good standing with these guys, when your number comes up, you'll have a soft landing. That's what it's all about. It's a different kind of lobbying. So if you're Goldman Sachs and you take care of these guys who who for health reasons had to leave office, the voters got sick of them. Well, everybody else is going to look around and say, hey, the Goldman guys, you want to be on the good side of them, because if you need something, they'll take care of you. I mean, it really is. It's our country is run just like the mafia. I mean, the mafia operated like this. I mean, it's no different. And I don't, honestly, I'm not offended by it. I'm fine with rich people being in charge. I don't want poor people or stupid people in charge, because I've been poor and I've been around stupid people and it doesn't work. So I'm okay with, rich people being in charge. I just want to be honest about it. I would much rather like Chuck Schumer come out and say, hey, look, I'm happy to vote for, I don't know, student loan reform, but, my handlers at Goldman told me I can't. So,
Right. Or if they had like a modicum of public spiritedness, if they actually cared about the country that they rule over, they were actually smart and competent, you'd probably be okay with that.
Yeah. I mean, look, one of the funny things about, like, if you spend time in Eastern Europe, particularly Russia, is that people are fine with Putin having the power that he has and his being basically the undisputed ruler. They're okay with it because it's clear. They get it.
Yep.
I mean, they actually have opposition media in Russia. The Moscow Times is opposition. And there's a range of activity. The people in charge, they understand, they have constituents, and they also need that feedback from the public to find out whether they're on, are they bumping up against some sort of limits that could get them in trouble. They're fine with it. And for the most part, as long as people feel as if they're being treated fairly, they have economic opportunities, they have social opportunities, and they have a sense of belonging. I mean, one of the things that's happened in Russia over the last 10 years is that the Russian people have kind of regained their identity, their sense of who they are, and they credit Putin to a great extent for that. And they're probably not wrong about that, which is why during this time they're going through right now, the support has rallied around the flag. Well, that's fun. People like living that way. I mean, look, this is the reason that Bush got away with all his crap, is that most Americans really liked waving the flag. Being patriotic is great. It feels good. It really feels good.
Yeah. Trump took advantage of that as well with his rallies.
Yeah.
I could feel that.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. Especially even if you're not in them, at the end of the 2020 election, where he's out in Western PA and there's 50,000 people show up, you're like, wow, that's amazing. Yeah, it is. I mean, it's absolutely incredible. And that's what leaders are supposed to do. They're supposed to give you that, give people that sense of belonging to something larger, have a general direction for the country, have a public sense of duty to the people. Those are the things that you want. I mean, it's not that hard. I mean, it's not as if society hasn't been able to come up with those kind of leaders. But for some reason or other, our system in the United States went sideways in the 20th century. And it's gotten progressively worse, but it's accelerated at the end of the Cold War. The end of the Cold War was a real, Alexander Dugin said that the end of the Cold War was a disaster, and people think that he means the disaster for the Soviet Union, but what he meant was a disaster, and that this set of constraints, this framework that kind of held all this stuff together, all of a sudden was gone, and all the worst qualities started pouring out. And it was true in Russia, and it's been true in the United States as well. I think less so in Europe, because they're really kind of just, I don't know, they're just kind of beaten down. Yeah, I mean, Europe is just a province of the United States at this point. But
it's funny you mentioned that it operates like a mafia. And I try explaining on my podcast and my streams and to some close relatives of mine and friends, something that's glaringly obvious, mafia-esque, and they get horrified by it. Like, yeah, though, that's obviously a money laundering operation, and they don't really understand how organized crime works. And I think people in parts of Europe understand that some of these things operate in such a manner. Again, living in Southeast Asia, the Cambodia's People Party, it's clearly a mafia. They anoint one another, and they have this little infighting where they kill one another, and that's just the day-to-day routine. In China, you act like someone from a peasant from China who relocated to the United States. You talking about American politics, and like, why do you care? You care so much about politics, and in China, that's just the way it works. There's nothing you can really do about it. But in the United States, it's like a duty to vote, and we got to stop corruption and all this rah mentality.
Vote harder.
Yeah, it just vote harder, and it's difficult to explain to the normie just the way things operate, and they just have this very American. I don't want to say progressive, but they have this view that, that the people do have a say in what happens geopolitical in the country, or as far as geopolitics.
Yeah, it is a weird thing, I think, in that I forget who I was talking to about this. I don't remember the context anymore, but what I said to him, I go, somebody, a guy moves into your neighborhood, let's say, and you see him out there, he just moved in, and you go over, you shake his hand, and he says he's Fred, and he just moved from Cleveland, and you ask him what he does for a living, and he's like, oh, he gives you a funny answer. You're like, okay, well, maybe he doesn't have a job or something, but then his kids walk up and they don't call him, they call him Bob or Uncle Bob or something, like, what the hell's going on here, and his story doesn't seem to fit together. You immediately are suspicious. You're like, wait a second, this guy, I don't know, there's something wrong here, because normally how we evaluate people is, does the story of their life make sense, or is the story of their life offensive or pleasing? We think of people when we meet them as there's a story to their life. So if you meet that new neighbor, he's an attorney, he got transferred from Cleveland, but he's originally from somewhere else, he gives you the story and it all kind of makes sense, and you go, oh yeah, okay, and he seems like a nice guy, it all makes sense. That's how normal people do things in normal life. In politics, we do it completely different. In politics, some guy shows up, his story makes no sense whatsoever. We have no idea where this is, and we trust him completely. We absolutely, all he has to do is say one thing, and we're like, oh, absolutely. And it's not just politicians, it's people online. We build these emotional relationships with the avatars on screens, and it's crazy. I mean, look, most people in a company understand the company culture. For my entire life, how old am I? For 30 years now. I've been in and out of corporations, big corporations, huge global corporations, small companies. They all have a culture, and everybody inside understands the culture. I'm an outside consultant now. When I come in, people will say to me, hey, let me give you a rundown of what the culture is like here. And everybody just accepts it. Nobody thinks it's weird that, hey, we have a lot of meetings, or, hey, we're a no meeting operation. It kind of gets us in trouble because, we shoot from the hip a lot, but you know what? That's just who we are, and you have to roll with it. No one thinks that's weird. In politics, we'll say, well, wait a second. I'm okay with Mayor, whatever his name is, getting his beak wet, because he makes sure the trash cans are always empty, the crime's not a problem, and all the potholes are fixed. All right, that's a deal I can live with. A little corruption, okay, good for him. We'll consider that a tip. That would be normal, but we don't. We're now expecting perfection. We're setting these ridiculous standards in politics, of all places, and it's getting more hysterical too. Just tiny little things that are wrong, and people will fly off the handle. The pushback that in the schools with the groomer stuff, these transgender stuff and all that business. Now, I mean, first of all, 90% of people find this to be revolting. I mean, this shouldn't be a surprise to the advocates, but it's a mild pushback. People are just saying, hey, look, we don't want to throw you off a roof. We just don't want you in the restroom with my kid. That's, I mean, this is a really extremely mild pushback, and yet the hysterics that come from it. How our democracy is in danger because this weirdo dressed like a space alien and drag with a giant rubber phallus on his forehead is not allowed to be at the school library. I mean, it's like, my Lord. But I think it's getting worse, and I think it's because, again, we had these restraints for a very long time. The threat of thermonuclear war is a very sobering thing. I'm old. I came along at the end of that, and this was serious. Serious people were serious about this. They were worried about it, and that kind of thing set the tone. But then when it all went away, we had the Clintons blow into town and their degeneracy, and they're just. I tell people, you guys are what, in your 30s, right? So yeah, you wouldn't really remember that period, but if you watched a chat show in the 80s, a political show, right? It would be the host would bring someone on. He'd ask him questions politely, short questions, so he could get a short answer, go back and forth. There might be a little bit of testiness back and forth if, depending upon the setup, but generally it was polite. Then all of a sudden in the 90s, these people started coming on. They're screaming. They're talking over stuff. They're lying like crazy. I mean, it was really shocking the degree of lying that came all of a sudden came up. I mean, I'll never forget. So it's been this is 2002. So we're talking 30 years now. I still remember sitting on a couch with my friends. We're sitting there. We're getting ready to go. We're going to go drinking, right? So we're sitting there trying to figure out what we're going to do. And we watched the news for a minute. And Bill Clinton says, it was about his marijuana stuff. And I remember saying to my friend, I go, well, here he goes. He's going to finally confess to the thing that everybody did when he was his age. And, it's how ridiculous it was. And he says, the crazy story about I didn't inhale and all this other stuff. And we looked at each other like, are we insane? Did we just watch this?
Right.
But that all of a sudden, from that point on, it just became completely nuts. And, you have these moments, these inflection points, and that really was, that time was an inflection point, and things have just gotten completely, our politics have become deranged and warped and more democratic for sure. I mean, there's, more voices, more people in it, but that's a bad thing.
That's the problem.
If all of a sudden, the internet went down for a month, all of a sudden, like the companies that sell blood pressure medication would find that sales starting to slacken, because
well, it's a theme. You mentioned the word hysteria, and I noticed it's a theme running throughout your work that you're sort of immune to hysteria. I mean, whatever it is, you very admirably, I have to say, when COVID started, you looked at it from a rational, evidence-based perspective, and you said, okay, well, it looks like a bad virus, but it's not the worst thing in the world. And you said that the lockdowns would have resounding economic consequences that we can't predict because the economy is a complex system. You're one of the only people to say that, not the only, but certainly one of the only, going back to, I think, March of 2020, if I remember correctly. And, and I think you've been fully vindicated.
Yeah, it's funny. I got a lot of grief from my readers at first on it because, it's a great example of that, what they have is a John Gresham, the Gell-Mann amnesia effect, and so when you read something in the news and it's completely wrong, the subject, and you're like, wait a second, the guy who wrote this, or the site, the New York Times, they must have been taking drugs because everything is wrong. It's like they tried to get everything wrong. Then you go to the next story, and then you've completely forgot that they got all the stuff in the previous story wrong, and you accept this at face value. And a lot of people on our side who are very skeptical of the media, they fell into the COVID trap because, they didn't really know a lot about it. Now, in fairness, if you went back to my podcast, I did a show on plagues. I've had an interest in plagues for a long time, which is kind of a weird hobby to have, but I know a lot about plagues, and I know a lot about this stuff. I actually have done professional work on it. And, so I had some understanding of what could work and what couldn't work. But what I have to say that what I find astonishing is that there didn't appear to be anyone in government at any level who had some basic understanding. And there were people in the research areas and all that, they got shouted down, but there was no one in government that looked around and said, well, as a basic rule of governance, we have to say, what is it we can do? And will that actually mitigate the consequences? And if the answer is no, well, or we don't know, well, then we don't do it. You just don't throw money away like that. You don't throw resources away. And that didn't happen. And it's been a bit of an eye opener for me, because it really revealed just how incompetent our political class and our general ruling class. There's something really wrong there. Bill Gates is a smart guy. He's a brilliant man. Yet he's crazy. He wanted to blot out the sun. I mean, that's not normal.
No.
And
just look at him now.
He's gone insane.
In his interviews, he's obviously demented.
Yeah, the idea we can actually say without unironically that we have an oligarch who wants to blot out the sun. I mean, this
well, you can't accuse him of being unambitious, I guess.
Yeah. But if you said that 30 years ago, we're going to have rich people who want to blot it. Come on, stop.
Well, and now we're dealing with those consequences, economically, and you've been writing about this the whole time. And you had a couple of essays recently about the state of the economy and the inflation. The picture looks pretty dire.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about it is, I work with highly complex systems. And one of the things you learn when you work with systems, whether they're human systems, obviously these days they're human and computer systems. One of the things that you figure out really early on is that you can't always be sure what your changes are going to do to the system. It almost takes on a life of its own. I've talked a lot about emergent behavior because you'll see this in computer systems and software systems. There is emergent behavior, and it's a combination of the users and of the programmers and these intermediate layers between the business people, the users, and of course the developers and so forth. And there's a dynamic that builds, and all of a sudden, these things can evolve on you. They can start to kind of take on a life of their own. And once you start seeing this, you see it every day, and you deal with it, you get a great appreciation for complexity. The most people look at the world like a watch. There's these linear relationships that you can map out rather easily, but in reality, the world is like, especially the economy, it's like a garden. You put some flowers of one type on this side and some other things on the other side and all that. If you get the balance out, you're going to get different results. There's small little things, and it's really hard to follow the chain of causality. And what you almost end up doing is having, which is what was supposed to look, this is the way economics is supposed to work. You have these general truths that become constraints that you don't violate these things, like making everybody leave their job and go home because they have the sniffles. Right. That because these are the truths that are constrained the system. And then when you get into the granularity, well, things get a little dodgier. But yeah, I mean, I'm getting back to what I said. I'm still shocked in a way that I'm also surprised that like a lot of the HBD people, a lot of smart people on our side were pretty stupid about it too. And but you know what it is? What a big part of it is that you don't find very many people in politics at any level who've ever had a job.
Right. Joe Biden.
Yeah, I mean, Joe Biden's been a bum his whole life, and I mean, look, I worked in Washington briefly when I was a teenager in the 80s, and he was an old man in the 80s. Okay, so but
when he joined the Senate, there were like 3 other senators that had been born in the 19th century, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I mean, the 80s is a long time, and he's been in office, for a long time. But back then, he was known. People would say his name and roll their eyes because he was just known as this BS artist. This guy would tell these crazy whoppers, but he was harmlessly stupid. Everyone knew what the role was. The credit card companies, the banks had set up shop in Delaware. He was their senator. That was it. That was his job.
So cynical, and yet, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Chuck Schumer is basically a Goldman Sachs employee. I mean, everybody knows that. I mean, he is there for that one reason, is to look out for Goldman's interests. They have their own senator, and I'm sure I don't know who the senators in California are. I'm sure one of them is
Feinstein, right? And
well, look at her husband. I mean, that's it. Richard Ellis is one of the largest real estate developers and owners in the world. I remember seeing his signs in Thailand and Vietnam.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, there's Silicon Valley has their guy who is, probably a couple point guys that make sure, that's their job is to look out for their interests. And look, I'm unoffended by it, actually. Up until really the 20th century, these kind of relationships were considered normal. It was just. Yeah, I mean, everybody expected it, and people were reasonable about how power was wielded. I mean, because that's really what we're talking about. Rich people expect to have privileges, and I don't know, that's just the way the world is.
Yeah, I want to go back to the economy real quick, because that's one of the big reasons why I wanted to have you on the show. I did a show when I first started doing these live streams about the way the economy works, and I was in some type of business deal, and it was real estate, and I was comparing the mortgage application to a mortgage application from the early 90s to a mortgage application today. And I'm doing a comparison of the files The mortgage application in the 90s was maybe like 10 pages, if that, maybe less, you know, it was like some doodles on it, so on and so forth. And then the mortgage application in, at the time, 2018, I mean, it had to have been like 120, 150 pages. And, you know, I was trying to flesh this out during the live stream. I wasn't doing a really good job at it. And then I heard your talk with Myth of the 20th Century, and it just blew my eyes wide open because you broke it down in such a beautiful, you did such a great dissertation. It was a beautiful dissertation. And when I was about 23 at the time before I moved to Southeast Asia, and I had a job in New York City, and, you know, I was, shaking hands, meeting people, working out deals and such. And I kind of was just scratching my head. I go, this all doesn't make sense. I'm not really producing anything, but I have a huge salary. And I'm like, I felt guilty that I wasn't really contributing to the greater good, to the country, to the community, so on and so forth. And it bothered me because I felt like it was all running on white girl pixie dust. Like, I call it the boutique economy with this, with the Taco Bell infrastructure. Like how does the modern economy work? And we're at this point now with inflation, obviously what's in the news, with mortgage rates going up, between, 5.5% to 7% now. And I think gas, I just $5 a gallon where I live. If you can get it kind of lost in the weeds on what you see as far as what this transactional economy is based on, and will it somehow implode, or maybe we'll just be managing decline where we're all somewhat serfs, with this ruling class. And I'll leave it open to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, one of the things, and this is one of those crackpot ideas of mine, and that is, we had inflation in the 70s for the simple reason that, of course, we had too many dollars, right? And why do we have too many dollars? Well, from the 50s and 60s, any extra dollars could easily find a home in Europe because Europe was rebuilding from the war. So there was always opportunities to invest in Europe. So those dollars kind of sunk there. And yeah, they kind of trickled back a little bit, but they sunk in Europe. And so we had this artificial peg, I think what it was, $31, something like that. It was $31 for an ounce of gold. Well, everyone knew that was a lie. There was really many more dollars out there per ounce of gold. So, but it was okay. But then by the end of the 60s, Europe had largely rebuilt, and those dollars they didn't have a home, and they started showing up as inflation. And that kind of got fixed. Everyone thinks it got fixed, but it really didn't. We just found a new home for it. Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, to a lesser extent, the Philippines. But then, of course, China came online, and China has been this massive place to send dollars. Well, China's not a backward country anymore, desperate for investment dollars. And those dollars are now floating back into the United States economy again. Excuse me. I had to cough. But, so we have this problem, but it's a larger problem in a sense that for a very long time, we haven't actually been a real economy. A real economy makes things, it fixes things, it invents things. And it has certain pressures that it puts on the population to achieve certain things, develop itself, that sort of thing, and in our kind of modern industrial, post-industrial economy, there's going to be pressure for finding people within the population that can be plucked out and trained. And we used to do this fairly well in the 50s, 60s, 70s, even in the 80s. My generation was probably the last to experience this at all, where if you were a poor guy with good grades, somebody found you and said, hey, we'll get you into college, and help you along. But we're not a real economy. We don't really make stuff. We don't fix things. We do invent stuff. We invent stupid things that don't exist. I mean, they're not real things. And, there are things that exist only because we've created this sort of weird set of rules. We have this new environmental technology. Well, we don't need that environmental technology. Right. The only reason it exists at all is because the government passed a rule and said, you have to have this environmental technology. It's all busy work, and I think, we put off for a long time this comeuppance of, we're a very hollowed out economy, and it's going to be very expensive. We're all going to get poorer, and we're going to have to move a tremendous amount of stuff outside, it's currently outside the U.S. economy, back into the U.S. economy, making things. I mean, we don't make our own antibiotics, which is insane. we there's lots of important things. We don't, our Air Force, our military is highly dependent upon titanium, most of which we get from Russia. We have our own titanium supplies. We could develop those. We could develop, our rare earth minerals. There's lots of things we could do, So I think, it's a pirate economy, look at, if you can get away with skimming off of a high volume transactional system, and why would you then, not do that and instead take the hard road of investing in hard things like manufacturing and the development of natural resources and all that other stuff. I think for several generations now, people have been able to get rich and stay rich skimming, a rentier economy. And so they did that. And but I think we've run out of road now. And it's going to be a fun ride in a lot of ways, because all of a sudden, these companies are going to be looking around and saying, you know what, maybe we don't need a diversity manager. Maybe that diversity retreat, maybe we'll cancel it this year. We're not going to need that.
What's your take on like Blackrock and Vanguard basically subsidizing a lot of these corporations? Like, okay, they have someone in the diversity office. Technically, they don't need that individual. Yet, any rational businessman would say, get rid of that person not contributing to the, my stock. But BlackRock and Vanguard are popping a lot of these. Like these shadow companies. I mean, I've gotten lost in the weeds on it a couple of times. Yeah, Steve. Yeah,
they're demanding with ESG rules,
right.
And
you have to be sustainable. I think it was BlackRock was dictating to Exxon, saying you have to be sustainable. You have to reach these certain benchmarks, or we'll have some type of hostile takeover, or we're going to buy more shares. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, that's good time Charlie stuff. Like West Virginia is already rebelling against this stuff. There's a lot of positive signs in terms of local rebellions to things. Florida, West Virginia started doing things, Texas. But look, I do math for a living, and one of the things that I know is true is that 2 + 2 = 4 for all values of 2. There are axioms of the universe that can't be violated, and these super rich companies, when there's good times, everyone will go along with BlackRock or something, because let's face it, they're just an arm of the government. That's right. That's all they are. And companies will go along with this stuff to a point. But then when things get tough, Exxon will go, okay, here's your choice. You can have heat in the winter, or you can have a diversity officer. Which one you want? And that is I think inevitably what's going to happen here. We're going to have 4 or 5 more years of lunacy as long as Biden is in office, and who knows? They might rig the next election, and we might end up with, I don't know, DMV lady as president. But
it's very reassuring listening to you. I think this gets to another question that we were going to ask is this idea that is very prevalent in the alternative media, that the end is nigh, and it's all going to collapse. We're all going to be eating tree bark to survive. It's going to be some combination of Mad Max and I don't know, Rwanda. You don't seem to take that perspective. You're highlighting these basic problems that have been building for many decades, but you don't really take the view that it's all going to come crashing down and we're all going to be very poor. It's actually quite reassuring to listen to you, because it gives me some confidence that we can work our way through these problems.
Yeah, nature finds a way. The thing is, I played sports my whole life, and one of the things that was one of the great lessons I always learned is that in sports, you had all the social stuff. Of course, it's a male bonding and male fraternity and all that other stuff. And you have, like in football, big roster, so you have different groups of guys pair up with each other. But ultimately, the only thing that matters is winning. And the only way you win is that every man does his job, and that means you get the best men on the field out there doing their job their best. That's what matters. That all the bullshit goes away as soon as things get serious. I wrestled for 12 years. You did all the horse shit that goes on in the practice and all the stuff that goes on amongst guys. The only thing that matters when you walked out on the mat. That ended it. That ended all this other stuff. And this is the reality of the human condition. At some point, all that other stuff gets pushed aside, because what matters is we have to be able to feed ourselves. We have to be able to maintain our communities. We have to maintain our society, our family structures. We have to preserve the homes of our gods. We don't think of it that way, but every society has its gods. It has the things that it says, these are beyond our ability to comprehend, and we keep them at this place. And anybody who tries to touch this stuff, we're going to kill them. And that's the way it is. All societies work this way, and ours is no different. We have not transcended the human condition or any of this other happy nonsense. And but we've had a good run. It seems like we have transcended, but we haven't. And as soon as that becomes clear that we have to make these hard decisions, I trust in the fact that nature will take its course and serious people will rise to the top. Now, it might be a bloody revolution that comes along with this. But so what? You need one of those once in a while. Jefferson was right. I've used that quote a bunch of times. Yeah, if you read the piece before it, it's a very rational understanding that you need to have this once in a while. We need the people in charge either need to be reminded of their duties or pay the price for not abiding by their duties. It has to happen. It's the only way to make a society function. And we've just had a long run where nobody's had to do that. And it's all going to come back to haunt you. I don't know if you guys know anything about accounting, but we've had this long accrual. We've pushed off all these expenses for a very long time. And but I think the only thing I really worry about the most is that the typical white person in America is 58. The typical black guy is 27. The typical Hispanic, I think, is 11. And this demographic transition we're going to go through, it's going to be hard. It's going to be very hard. And what's going to come out the other end is something we're not going to have civic nationalism or the Constitution or anything like that. I think what we're going to have to have is something like you see in South America, where you have a color wheel, a color gradient, and the people at the top of that pyramid are going to understand they have to be at the top in order for the rest of the society to function. There's a sort of chauvinism that's going to have to be developed in America. And you see this in South America. Is one of these easy ones. You go through South America and look at the picture of every president or whatever they're calling the guy of South America. They're all whiter than me.
Yeah.
These guys, they glow in the damn
Bush
dark.
family.
Yeah. You walk the streets of Mexico and it's all guys who look like they're from a National Geographic special on the Incas or something, but you look at the ruling class and they all look like Europeans,
Well, you bring that up because we were supposed to do that chat last night, and me and Expat decided to do a show, and we were talking a little bit about this, and we were talking about this the Brazilification of the United States. But in South America, they have an underpinning, basically the Catholic Church kind of dictates a lot of things going on in South America to one degree or another. I'm not going to get lost in the weeds on which country is more Catholic than the other, but Brazil is a great example. They have obviously, a color wheel. They have blue-eyed, blonde-haired people in the South. You go further north, they're more they look more like Native Americans or whatever. And, there's a lot of interracial marriage, but, they don't necessarily have a racism problem. It's all right. The blacks are at the lower tier. If they want to push themselves up, they can make their way up through the grapevine one way or another. It's harder. But in the United States, we don't have an underpinning religion. The whole rah-rah America, American flag kind of a thing, that's gone to the wayside unless we go to war with a nation. So I don't necessarily see this Brazilification. I think ours is going to be much more bleak, and it's because we're more racially aware, especially when we constantly hear about it ad nauseum from the mainstream media. But we also see this wannabe noble class of whites who vote for Bernie Sanders. They're okay with the transgender industrial complex, and they kind of wall themselves off from Lagos, right? They it's like, so okay, but you don't actually engage with minorities. You talk the talk, but you don't walk the walk. So what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I think South America gives us some sense of where things are going, but it's not an exact copy. I think Eurasia gives us some sense of it. I'm kind of a student of Russia, and I write a fair amount about it. And what you see there is, it's taken a while for them to kind of figure it out themselves, is that there has to be there's this sort of hierarchy in the sense that, it's the best among equals sort of approach where, for the Russians see themselves as being sort of the leaders of the Russian Federation, all these different peoples. And they at one, they have two minds. At one mind says we're all in this together, brothers, and on the other mind says, but yeah, we're all really different and we're in charge. And it's this sort of dualism that exists. And I mean, that's not an unusual feature in any society, but I think for our side, our uniqueness is in the regionality, and there's some good news there. The oldest parts of the country are the most troublesome ones. I've joked around recently saying, there's the old line about 13 do 50. Well, there's 20 do 100. The 20% of the white population that is self-described left-wing, liberal, progressive, they are responsible for 100% of the problems we have culturally. These are the problems. If we honestly, if we rounded these people up at 60, it's not even 60 million, it's about 48 million people, and we ship them off to someplace else far away, all of a sudden America becomes Switzerland. We would become Switzerland. We become New England would be its own sort of semi-autonomous place. The Deep South, the Southwest, Appalachia, these all places would basically go back to home rule, self-rule, and the federal government would shrink back down. But the good news is that those areas that have these Puritan, do-gooders and reformers, they're the oldest parts of the country. You really see this when you go there. Like, I live obviously in Baltimore, where obviously it's very diverse, and it's also very young. I mean, the Black population's younger. And you go to New England, everybody's old and white. I mean, it's it's stunning.
Yeah.
You're like, wow. And it really is quite an incredible thing. But that's a good thing. That population's getting older. It's definitely losing its energy. I mean, you can see this in like the Democratic Party, the next wing that's coming up, the next generation. First of all, they're kind of stupid. And Ocasio-Cortez is dumb. I mean, she's a barmaid, and there's really not a lot there, but they're not from New England, so I think in that way it'll be a good thing. But I think what we end up with is some sort of combination of where, we end up back to our old regionalism, but within those regions, there's a sort of noblesse oblige between the groups that are there. I'm much more optimistic about Hispanics than a lot of people understand.
Interesting. That's interesting because. Yeah.
Yeah, and the reason is that I never bought into this stuff that they're natural conservatives.
Right.
I think Hispanics are natural racists. Because I say racist is that they do understand race. They get this. They understand implicitly. You talk to a typical Mexican, and he understands there's a difference between people from northern Mexico. There's a difference between people who have a high degree of Indio, blood. He gets all this stuff. He knows. He understands it, and they're not offended by judging people upon how they look.
It's funny you say that, because I've relocated down south, and my landscape company that handles my community, they had the area code from where I grew up, and she was looking at, she's the owner, she's looking at me, and she's like, well, where are you from? I go, well, I'm from New York. She goes, where in New York? And I mentioned the town, and turns out she graduated from the high school next to me, and she's from El Salvador. Few months roll by, and we get to know one another, and she goes, wow. I mean, she goes, Italians are not like white people. You guys are, in fact, different. I go, I've been trying to, it's funny because I've always felt that way. And, we were having a little bit of conversation. I was explaining to her a little bit of the differences between the ethnic groups, between the gringo and, Irish. And, then it started to sink into her head, because where we're located, it's this like kind of this deracinated white people, and they identify with dead objects. And what I mean by that is they'll identify with the granite countertop, they'll identify with the plaque on the wall from the college they graduated from, with their 401k, their Roth IRA, and things like that. And I feel like those type of white people, air quote white people, are going to have to some way, one or another, start finding their roots, because where we're going, you're going to have to be more aware of who you are and what your identity is, and not necessarily with the LGBT flag, because that's a very bourgeois ideology, this LGBT, and if you want to be trans and stuff, because in a lot of poorer nations, you don't have the luxuries of identifying with whatever you want. You get pregnant at 18, you pop out 3 or 4 kids before you're 25, and you're a homemaker and you sell Coca-Colas on the street. Like, there's no sitting back thinking, maybe, what, I do want a divorce and I want to be a lesbian now. You don't have, that's a very, bourgeois mindset. You don't have psychologists in Vietnam, because you don't have time you don't have the time to think about if you're unhappy or not, you know?
Right.
Yeah, your psychiatrist in Vietnam just gives you unfiltered cigarettes. These will calm your nerves. Yeah. Well, the thing about it is that in these luxury beliefs, I mean, we're that's one of the big problems. It's funny. We are a very bougie country, or at least our ruling class is. All the worst qualities of bourgeois life. And I've been a critic of bourgeois life because, I mean, I come from working stock, and I really, and I'm sincere in this, I just lack the social skills to get along in that world for any long distance. I always tell people that I'm, you know, middle class people can tolerate me in short spells, but after a while, my candor goes to get the better of me. But you know, but this is you could tolerate this, and this has happened in other societies. There's a great post that was in First Things about what they called the intelligent that existed in late 19th century, early 20th century Russia. I did a post with Tacky on the macaroni guys, which I mean, it's just, I mean, the pictures are unbelievably hilarious, but you know, there's this frivolousness that can come in through good times. And then look, again, this is one of those things where my politics are entirely rooted in my private sector experience. I've been in companies that have been booming, and guess what? We got puppies in the hallways. And then all of a sudden, you know, hey, we got problems. The puppies go away real fast. And, you know, everyone gets religion in a hurry. Now, sometimes, you know, the company doesn't make it, but you know, good times makes for soft men. I mean, that's what happens. And you know, when we hit, and the thing about it too, is that there is people haven't changed. They really haven't. It's just, you know, we can tolerate it much more. So that's why I'm much more optimistic about things, because like, you know, with the Hispanic stuff, you know, I think I'm optimistic because I think that these people are not conservative in the sense that the modern conservative sense. They're just conservative in the historical man sense. Hey, we're going to have separate areas in which we kind of are autonomous. So, you know, you'll have parts of the United States that are Hispanic culture, and they don't expect, you know, their world to be equal to the part that's mostly white guys. You know, they're gonna accept these differences, and they'll be fine with it. You know, and that'll actually, I think, to some degree, drive out some of the race conversation, because you see this in the polling. I mean, this is the one thing that, like, the typical Mexican guy or a Cuban, especially, yeah, definitely Cubans, they do not want to be thrown into the people of color bucket. They do not like that at all.
Right.
And you know, this whole the race stuff and the tranny stuff is really opening the eyes of that population. They're like, you know, Mitch McConnell isn't their cup of tea, but they'll find something else, you know. And so, I mean, I'm more optimistic about that. So, I mean, I think, but look, what, you know, I'm also a guy. I'm optimistic because I'm much more comfortable with an America that looks more like a highly balkanized territory with some general connections with each other, but otherwise is just a bunch of nations within a country. You know, I'm you know, and we don't have a navy.
That's how it used to be. Right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm fine with America going back to its 19th century idea. And
Well,
you know,
relocating, such as ourselves, we've relocated, and there's so many other people. I see plates from California, Washington, I see Alaska sometimes, and they're moving into places like Appalachia and Florida, so on and so forth. You don't think that's going to play into this balkanization factor with these people relocating at mass?
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's I don't know. One of the things that, you know, I lived in New Hampshire. I lived in Manchester, New Hampshire for a while, and all these idiots from Massachusetts moved there because of taxes and all the stuff that they went through in Massachusetts. And the first thing they did is said, "Hey, where are your drunken Irishmen? We need to vote for drunken Irishmen." And you're like, well, what's wrong with you? I mean, didn't you realize that the Hibernian problem was what you moved away from? You know.
The IQ, the Irish question.
Yeah, I mean, but you know, the same thing's happening in Texas and Colorado. You know, these people from California, they move out and they immediately start, you know, voting for lunatics, and it's happening in the South. I mean, look,
well, how do you
Virginia,
stop that? Can you? This is something I keep raising with people I meet, because, you know, down in the South, I've met a lot of people who themselves are fleeing from blue states or whatever, and sometimes they're liberal, but they'll tell me, "Oh, I just couldn't live there anymore. You know, I had to move here, but we got to stop other people like me from moving here." It's like, all right, well, you know, how are we going to do that?
Yeah, I mean, I
people
think
from voting, you know, for 5 years.
Well, you know, there's some self-selection there too. I mean, I think, you know, a place like Texas, it's not going to be California. There is a culture still matters. California never really had a culture. It was a bunch of, the anchor culture in California was sort of the Midwestern, the Midlanders, these kind of people who are timid, who tend to go along with things. Either people who, they would have been happy sitting out the Civil War, but they got dragged into it. So the California culture could be overtaken. But Texas, that's a different culture. That's Appalachia, that's Southerners. It's a different culture there. If there's a book called American Nations, I always recommend, because it's got maps and it shows the population flows. And he points out things like, there's towns in Connecticut that populated towns in Ohio, right? Because you see these town names that turn up all over the place. We have more than one Portland, more than one Salem. Well, the reason is that people from the original Portland moved to the other Portland, and they named it Portland. Well, the voting patterns hold up. There's like in the was it the Western Reserve, where people in Connecticut would move there. Well, to this day, they vote the same. They have similar educational patterns, marriage patterns, alcoholism patterns. All these things hold up because they're same populations. Well, you see this in the country. In Texas, where the founding population is largely going to be Northern Mexicans and Appalachian people. That's primarily what it is. They have a much different founding culture. And so it's much harder for them to be corrupted by these Californians coming in, but there's also selection pressure. Californians coming in are much more, they're looking for that kind of lifestyle. Right. While in California itself, you could overrun this sort of mamby-pamby soft culture of the Midwesterner who, the Ned Flanders culture, hey, let's all just play by the rules, guys. Well, nobody played by the rules and they lost. So, we kind of got astray here, but this whole regionalization thing is a big part of it, and there's a thing I've written about this before, there's things that it's in the soil. You see this just, you're in Salina, right? So if you go to a Western part of the state, it's a completely different place than the Eastern part of the state.
Yeah.
It's funny
and it's so different from other regions of the country I've lived in or visited too. I mean, just there's a sense of optimism. I mean, it's really hard. I mean, you mentioned that New England is sort of populated by aging people that it's losing its energy, its vitality, and I feel like the South has that vitality and it's a power that acts as a magnet for people around the country. I mean. So there is that selection pressure.
Well, it's also they
have an interest in preserving it.
I'll bring up my first article I had written for the American Sun, and I start off about white people relocating to New York City. And this was a new phenomenon, only past 10, 15 years of just people from Kansas or wherever who want to identify with the Island of Misfit Toys. And they show up and they just get clobbered by New York's culture. Like you cannot be soft living here. It was kind of cool when I used to go into the New York City subway. Even if you're from the Tibet, if you were from mainland China, if you were from Pakistan, it didn't matter. Wintertime, everyone wears black. It didn't matter. And if you came on the train wearing some sky blue sweatshirt, everyone looked at you like you're an absolute freak. And, all the people wearing black are like looking at each other like, look at this idiot. Even if that person wearing black didn't speak English, the native of New York's looking at the immigrant with some type of mutual respect. Like, yeah, that guy's an outsider and they're not going to last that long. And lo and behold, they do a couple, they do an internship with MTV or something like that. And, they're doing refrigerator art for some boutique art shop or something like that. And, they do their few years and, well, guess what? You have no money. You didn't accomplish anything back to where you come from.
Yeah, I mean, and look, that used to be the model of immigration. About a third of immigrants who came to the United States in the 19th century couldn't hack it and they left. They went back and but America, you can't be a doomsayer because we still have a fairly low population density relative to a lot of other places. That's a huge advantage. We have massive natural resources. Look, our biggest problem we have in this country is that we have unfortunately, we've evolved a managerial system that has resulted in a ruling elite that is really stupid. They're not really smart. I mean, I wrote today an example about what's going on with the sanctions with Russia. Now, there's a old expression, never play chess with a Russian. These are they're smart people and they're crafty people. They've been that's what they're known for. So the UU said, okay, we're going to put all these sanctions on. So that one of the things they sanctioned was repair parts for natural gas, pumping stations, pipelines, all the stuff it takes to get natural gas. Well, that'll really show the Russians. Of course, the natural gas is going to the Europeans. So if it stops flowing, it's not going to hurt the Russians. It's going to hurt the Europeans. But putting that aside, well, what the Germans have been plotting to say, hey, what we're going to do is we're going to buy up a lot of your natural gas now in the summer. We'll buy up as much as we can. We'll fill up all our reserve tanks. And then, hey, come the fall, we're going to turn it off and we're going to really screw you guys. Well, the Russians are not stupid. They looked at this and said, well, that's a stupid plan because you know what? We're going to take our stuff offline for repairs. And oh, geez, we can't get those repair parts from Siemens because of the sanctions. I guess you're not going to be able to fill those tanks up after all. Well, I mean, how did no one in Brussels figure this out? How did they not see that, hey, you know what? After your first move, there might be a second and third move required. They didn't, and
Right.
And at some point, reality doesn't go away when you stop believing in it. And we're festooned with all these morons all over the place. I mean, we have them. It's not just Europeans. What's her name? Granholm, the energy secretary. I mean, this woman is as dumb as a goldfish. I mean, she
doesn't know anything. Yeah.
I mean, when they ask her questions, she starts giggling, which is usually an indication of maybe mental illness or just really stupid. And I mean, it's true. I mean, woman giggles all the time, and like, wait a second, there's something wrong here. But
yeah.
At some point though, they're going to make enough mistakes where things have to change, and when we slough those guys off, we're still going to be left with a country that has more than enough resources to feed itself, provide all the energy it needs, run a very wealthy, successful economy that's almost impossible to attack. We're a giant island away from Asia and Russia and Europe. So, I mean, we got a lot of good things going for us. It's just, we just have an incredibly corrupted, stupid ruling elite. And, I mean, my regret, the only thing I'm not optimistic about is that I'm getting long in the tooth and I'm not going to be able to storm the barricades when the time comes.
Well, leave that to others, perhaps.
I'm going to be on my rascal scooter outside cheering them on,
And in closing, you brought up Ukraine and you wrote a really good article about our predicament, our conundrum in Eastern Europe. A lot of people, such as expat, think that you have to win a war really quick, or else it turns into some type of war of attrition. And I take the argument that that's a very American, armchair military approach to such things. That wars tend to last, sometimes decades, hundreds of years. It's not this whole shock and awe type of scenario that you're required to control the sky in order to win tactical and strategic victories. And Russia's taken a very methodical approach to engulfing Ukraine, and I think we just approved another $1 billion. And if you look at how much the West and more or less the United States has spent on this expedition versus what Russia has spent, I put the figure at 100 billion has been spent on the war for the United States and European nations, and Russia is coming in at 3 billion. And if you look at some of the statistics on who's winning and the casualty rate, I mean, this is not going well for the West and their plans for Ukraine. If you want to, build upon that and tell us what you see, and maybe this conflict over there will end sooner rather than later.
Well, I mean, it's a good example of the clash of cultures, a clash of civilizations, really. The Russian way of war has always been the same, and that is they're not terribly concerned with territory. But what they're focused on is in destroying the other guy's ability to fight, which generally means destroying his weapons and killing all of his people. I mean, this is what they did to Napoleon. Hey, we'll cede a whole bunch of land, allow you to even occupy Moscow, but you're not going to get out alive. And that's the same thing happened with the Germans. I mean, this is a mentality. And they've done the same thing here, which is really quite remarkable what they've managed to do. If you look at a map, they set up a scenario in which the Ukrainians keep sending more and more reinforcements into a pocket that's being obliterated with artillery. And I mean, it's horrible. I have nothing but sympathy for the Ukrainian people, especially these men who are being sent to their deaths. but there probably has been some estimates say that maybe 50,000 Ukrainians have died. Ukrainian soldiers have died so far. I mean, this is awful what's happening. It's a catastrophe, a human catastrophe. But the Russians are they're going to destroy that army, and if it takes to the end of the year, they're fine with that. Because this is a very low cost approach that they have. They're the best in the world at this kind of warfare. They're very good at it. And they've got the strategic advantages are now theirs because of terrible mistakes made by both the Ukrainians and the West. And from their perspective, a long war is actually better, because if they get a quick surrender, which is really counterintuitive, I know, but if the Ukrainians had said, oh, okay, we'll surrender, we'll let you have the Donbass and we'll recognize the Crimea. Well, that would allow the Ukrainian army to stay intact and allow the Ukrainians to change their mind and come back and, with another $100 billion worth of American weapons and American trainers, maybe instead of having a 200,000 man army, they get to a 500,000 man army and then can go in and attack the defenders of the Donbass, maybe even attack into Russia. In other words, a quick loss, which would have been the smart thing to do from the Ukrainian perspective, would have allowed them to have allow them to fight another day, but it also would have forced the Russians to deploy resources there long after they got their victory. When this is done, there's not going to be anybody left to fight back, and there's not going to be any will to fight back. The Ukraine will be a basket case economically. Their infrastructure will be cratered. They won't have access to the sea. Europe will be sick of it because it's already happening. You can see the Europeans are looking to abandon the project. It's a human tragedy. It's a horrible thing. I mean, I know a fair number of Ukrainians, and it's awful and it's unnecessary. But
I feel like it's just a genocide of Ukrainian males. The more I look at this and see who's dying, and these are strapping masculine men getting killed, and I'm like, man, I can't even look at it, some of it anymore, because it's heartbreaking to see these guys go out there and throw their lives and be cannon fodder for what exactly? I mean, do they even know what they're fighting for, other than just to hate Russia? Do they understand who their ruling class, the ruling class of Ukraine is? And I understand why they would want their own country. I mean, it has been, I guess, I don't know if you want to call it a sovereign nation the past 30 years. I mean, it kind of always been somewhat of a Russian vassal state. But again, you're looking at these guys, they're like bodybuilders, and they got a bunch of Born to Lose tattoos. They don't have any money, and they're just trying to hold on to what little they have. And I don't know if the Russian military is kind of like signaling to them, hey man, just stop. And what are you fighting for? And I think Russia has done that too. I see them out there with the loudspeakers. I don't speak Russian. I don't know what the hell they're saying to these guys.
They're leafleting these guys pretty heavy to try and get them to surrender. But, look, the Ukrainian professional military is a professional military, and they follow orders. And, they're running into troubles with desertions. I mean, they're literally right now, like Poland announced that any Ukrainian males that are in the country who are draft age will be rounded up and sent over to Ukraine.
Oh my God.
Yeah. This is, but I mean, there's videos all over the place of Ukrainian young males running away from quote unquote recruiters. These guys just snatch them off the streets, and they give them, basically they give them an old, grand and send them off to the front. But there's huge desertion problems, and which is a good thing. I'm happy that they'll get to live, and have lives and make little Ukrainians. But think of it as probably, I bet you 70% of ethnic Ukrainians would have been happy with a deal like Belarus has, where, you get to preserve your culture and your language, and you have a fair amount of autonomy and all this stuff. But, you just respect the fact that you're a part of this larger Eurasian civilization, the Russian Federation. And, there's comes with some compromises, but it comes with some benefits too. And I think most Ukrainians would have had that. It's just Western meddling, and it really is the neocons. These people are crazy. It's an insane cult at this point. And you read the stuff from these guys, and I mean, the end result needs to be that they all get rounded up and sent someplace that we never hear from them again. And I understand, with that crowd, the word rounding up can be kind of sensitive, but I'm willing to roll those dice with these guys.
Hey, well, listen, we're coming up on an hour and a half. Plans for the future? Are you going to keep on posting on your blog? Do you have maybe a book perhaps? Or are you going to do a few rounds on different podcasts? Can you tell us a little bit about your future?
Well, I'm about 70% through a book. I've got, it's going to be 10 essays, one long essay much long one that I will also package as a standalone PDF sort of deal. And I'm about 70% of the way through that. And I'm not, it's essays. So it's like the 10,000 word essays. I'm going to do some longer form stuff to just, try to do that. I'm knock on wood, I can get that done this year. I'm going to redo my site entirely. That's in the works, new software, new everything. Start to do some more community building skills there for people to better interact and do their own things. I'm starting to get invites now that things are opening up to go do some speaking, which I'll try to do if time permits. And I'll write every day, do the podcast. I have some thoughts about a live stream, like a weekly live stream, but you can only do so many things at once. I mean, I have a day job, so
Right.
Amazingly enough.
Yeah, I mean, look, you only have so much time, and I'm not going to be cheated. When I blink my last blink, there's no one going to say, "Hey, you know what? You squandered time." That's not going to be me. I'll use every minute.
Good.
Well, listen, absolute pleasure speaking to you. Let's keep in touch. Maybe we'll revisit this in a half a year or something like that before the year is out. I really appreciate your work. I hope my listeners enjoyed these topic of conversations with you. And again, thank you, Z-Man, so much. Really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me. I had a lot of fun, and send me a link to where you post it so that I can put it up on the site on Monday. What's today? Saturday, Monday, and with the other stuff so that my people can go listen. And anytime. I enjoyed myself. And again, I apologize for scheduling snafu yesterday, but old age is catching up with me.
Don't worry about it, and don't let my email get buried in the 250 emails you receive on the daily. All right.
All righty, guys.
You have a great night. Take care.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
Bye-bye.